short message and a green emoji. It happened just after dinner. I was sitting on my porch in Dallas watching the sky fade from pink to gray when my phone buzzed. It was our family group chat. My son David had written, "We think it's best if Mom takes a step back for now." And right below it, my daughter-in-law Lily had reacted with a bright green thumbs up. For a few seconds I just stared at the screen, waiting for someone to add something, maybe a joke or an explanation. But there was nothing. Just those words and that tiny hand pointing upward like a seal of approval on my exile. I took a slow breath, felt the tightness in my chest, and typed my reply. Understood. I'll be stepping back from paying the house mortgage and from the $5,000 monthly transfers. Then I put the phone face down on the table and leaned back in my chair. The night air felt strange, quiet, almost peaceful. I could already imagine the shock on their faces when they read my message. For 15 years I had been the invisible engine that kept their lives running, the silent accountant who paid for their homes, their emergencies, their little luxuries. They had mistaken my kindness for duty and my silence for consent. That evening I poured myself a small glass of wine. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from release. I realized that a single message had done what I couldn't do in years of exhaustion. It had closed a chapter. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to fix anything. As I watched the lights from my neighbors' houses flicker in the distance, I whispered to myself, "This is what freedom sounds like." I didn't know yet that the messages, the guilt, the tears, and the accusations were coming. All I knew was that for one precious night, I could breathe without owing anyone a thing. 15 years earlier, life looked very different. My son David had just introduced us to Lily, a bright young woman with an easy smile and big plans. "Mom," he said, "she's the one." I believed him, of course I did. I wanted my children to have the kind of love I once had with my late husband, Tom. The wedding was beautiful but expensive. David said they were struggling with costs, so I covered the dress, the venue, and half of the catering. It felt good at the time, like I was helping to build their happiness. When Lily hugged me and said, "You're like a second mom to me," my heart melted. I didn't know then that every thank you would soon come with a price tag. A year later David called again. "Mom, we found a perfect house near the park," he said, excitement in his voice. "But we're short on the down payment." I had just sold a small condo I owned, the one Tom and I bought in our 20s. That money was meant to keep me comfortable in retirement, but David sounded so hopeful. "It's just $40,000, Mom," he said. "We'll pay you back, I promise." I told myself it was family. You don't charge interest to your children, so I wired him the money and went to bed smiling, thinking I had secured my family's future. I didn't know I had just bought my way into a lifetime of silent expectations. Months later another call came. "Mom, the mortgage is higher than we thought. Just for a few months, can you help?" A few months turned into 5 years. $1,200 every month, automatically withdrawn from my account. Then my daughter Erin called. "Mom, the kitchen is falling apart," she said. "And the kids need tutoring. We'll pay you back when Mark's new job starts." It never did. I paid for the remodeling, the tutoring, the birthdays, the so-called emergencies that were just poor planning. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being their mother and became their financial plan. I wasn't asked how I was doing, only if I could help one more time. Every transfer came with a thank you, but no one ever asked, "Are you okay, Mom?" I told myself this was love, but deep down I knew I was confusing love with sacrifice. It was a warm Saturday evening in late spring when everything shifted. I had invited everyone over for dinner, something I hadn't done in a while. I cooked roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and peach cobbler, the way Tom used to like it. I set the table with the good china, thinking maybe a home-cooked meal could bring us closer again. When we sat down, the laughter felt forced. David talked about work, Lily checked her phone every few minutes, Erin complained about her bills. I listened quietly, waiting for the right moment. After dessert, I took a deep breath and said, "Kids, there's something important I need to talk about." They looked up, forks frozen in midair. "I've decided it's time for you both to handle your own finances," I said carefully. "You have stable jobs now, and I'm not going to be able to help as much moving forward." The room went silent. Then David spoke first, his voice sharp. "What does that mean, Mom? You're cutting us off." "I'm not cutting anyone off," I replied. "I'm just saying it's time for you to stand on your own." Lily gave a short, bitter laugh. "Wow, after everything we've done for you." I blinked. Everything you've done for me? I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words caught in my throat. Erin leaned forward, her tone half pleading, half irritated. Mom, you know we count on you. This isn't just about money, it's about family. Family doesn't mean I have to keep funding your lives, I said softly. I'm 72. I need to think about my future too. David slammed his glass onto the table. You're changing, Mom. You're not the same. No one helped me clean up that night. The sound of chairs scraping across the floor was the last thing I heard before the door closed. I stood alone in the quiet kitchen, staring at the half-empty wine glasses, and whispered to myself, maybe it's time I changed. After that dinner, the silence arrived like a storm that had already passed. My phone stopped ringing. No weekend visits, no short texts, no photos of the grandkids. Days stretched into weeks, and the distance between us grew like an invisible wall. Then one afternoon, Erin called. Mom, can we grab coffee? I think we should talk. I felt a spark of hope. Maybe she understood. Maybe she missed me. I drove to the cafe early and found her already seated, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up when I arrived. Hi, honey, I said, sitting down. Everything okay? She sighed and placed her phone on the table. David told me about your little announcement at dinner. Mom, that was really unfair. You've been so negative lately. What's going on with you? Negative. The word hit me harder than I expected. I'm not negative, I said slowly. I'm just trying to set boundaries. I can't keep supporting everyone forever. Erin frowned. You're being dramatic. We're family. Families help each other. I've helped for 15 years, I replied. At some point, helping turns into enabling. She looked offended, like I had said something unforgivable. You've changed, Mom. You used to be kind. I wanted to say kindness doesn't mean I have to be used, but I swallowed the words. I realized nothing I said would change her mind. She finished her latte, said she had a meeting, and left. I sat there, alone at that little table, surrounded by people talking and laughing, and felt smaller than I had in years. 2 days later came the message, the one that ended it all. David's group chat text, we think it's best if Mom takes a step back for now. And Lily's green thumbs up. I stared at that emoji for a long time. It was strange how such a tiny symbol could feel like a knife. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even call them. I opened my laptop, logged into my online banking, and started making changes. I canceled every automatic transfer, every shared card, every joint account. If they wanted distance, I'd give them distance. But this time it would come without my money attached. I whispered to myself, you raised adults, Sandra. Let them prove it. For the first time in years, the house was silent. No phone buzzing, no constant messages asking for help, no reminders to send money. Just the ticking of the clock and the sound of my own breathing. The first morning after cutting the transfers, I woke up expecting panic. Instead, I felt calm. I brewed my coffee slowly, opened the curtains, and watched the sunlight spill across my kitchen table. The air felt lighter, like a weight I hadn't noticed was finally gone. By the third day, I found myself doing things I had forgotten I enjoyed. I took a walk in the park, visited the library, even pulled out the old paint set Tom had given me years ago. I hadn't painted in over a decade. My hands were stiff at first, but the colors flowed like something waiting to come alive again. Then the messages began. David, Mom, we need to talk. You're overreacting. Lily, you can't just stop paying the mortgage like that. We have responsibilities. Erin, I can't believe you're doing this to us. The kids are confused. They think Grandma doesn't love them. I read every word quietly, one by one, like a script I had already memorized. Every sentence was a blend of guilt and entitlement, written not out of love, but out of fear of losing comfort, not connection. I didn't respond. I didn't owe them explanations. I muted the chat and went back to my painting. The brush strokes steadied my heartbeat in a way nothing else could. Each day without their demands felt like a small victory, even if it came wrapped in loneliness. I missed hearing my grandchildren's laughter, but I didn't miss the phone calls that always ended with, Mom, can you help us out? That night, I sat on the porch again, the same place where it had all started. The sky was deep blue, the air soft and quiet. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty, it felt earned. And I realized that peace isn't found when everyone is happy with you. It's found when you finally stop apologizing for wanting to rest. A week later, I heard the doorbell ring 3 times in a row, sharp, impatient. When I looked through the window, David was standing there alone, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. I opened the door but didn't smile. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. "Come in," I replied, stepping aside. He walked in, glancing around the living room like it was unfamiliar territory. We sat across from each other, the space between us heavy with years of unspoken truth. "Mom, this whole thing has gone too far," he started. "That message, it wasn't meant the way you took it. Lily was upset, I was frustrated, we just needed a little space." I nodded slowly. "Space," I repeated, "and that's exactly what I gave you." He shifted uncomfortably. "You didn't have to stop helping us. The mortgage, the bills were drowning now. It's not fair." I stood up quietly and walked to my desk. From the drawer, I pulled out a thick gray folder and placed it on the coffee table. "What's this?" he asked. "Every transfer I've made for the past 15 years, I said, opening it. "Every payment, every favor, every emergency you couldn't handle on your own." David looked down at the papers, his face tightening as I turned the pages. "40,000 for your down payment, 72,000 for 5 years of mortgage payments, thousands for gifts, trips, repairs, and holidays. In total, $243,000. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I continued, calm and steady. "I'm not angry, David. I'm just done. You call it selfish, I call it survival." "Mom, it's not about money," he argued. "You've just changed." I gave a small laugh. "Of course I've changed. I finally learned that love doesn't mean bankruptcy." He stood up, red-faced. "You're going to regret this." I met his eyes, my voice quiet but firm. "No, son, you'll learn from it. That's what growing up is supposed to be." He left without another word, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I waited for the tears to come, but they didn't. I just stood there, staring at the folder still open on the table. The evidence of 15 years of sacrifice lay in black and white. And for the first time, the numbers didn't make me feel small, they made me feel free. The following weeks were quieter than I expected. No calls, no apologies, no sudden visits. The silence that once frightened me now felt like a soft blanket. I could finally hear my own thoughts without interruption. Grace, my older sister, called one morning. She had heard bits of what happened. "Sandra," she said, "you didn't lose your family. You found yourself. Don't ever feel guilty for that." Her words stayed with me. I had spent years drowning in guilt, but for once someone told me it was okay to breathe. My neighbor, George Reed, started waving from across the yard more often. One afternoon he walked over holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like someone who needs company," he said, with a gentle smile. We sat on the porch and talked for hours about everything: our late spouses, our grown children, the strange quiet that fills a house after everyone moves out. He didn't interrupt or offer advice, he just listened. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen, not as a mother or a provider, but as a person. In the evenings I began to paint again. My hands found rhythm and color: the blue of peace, the gold of forgiveness, the soft gray of starting over. Sometimes I'd catch myself humming while I worked and I'd stop, surprised. It had been years since I'd hummed without sadness in my throat. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was Sophie, my 16-year-old granddaughter. I almost didn't answer, afraid it would just be another plea to fix things. But when I picked up, her voice trembled. "Grandma, I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. I heard Mom and Dad talking, and I think you did the right thing." I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall freely. "Thank you, sweetheart," I whispered. Her voice was soft but certain. "I hope when I grow up, I'm as strong as you." When we hung up, I sat there for a long time, holding the phone to my chest. That small call, that moment of understanding, it healed something money never could. For the first time, I believed I hadn't lost everything. I had simply made room for something real to grow. 6 months later, I woke to the sound of birds outside my window and sunlight pouring across the floor. My life was quieter now, but not empty. It was mine. The mornings no longer began with requests or reminders. They began with peace. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was David. I hesitated before answering, taking a slow breath. "Hello," I said. His voice was softer than I remembered. "Hi, Mom. I just wanted to tell you you were right." I didn't speak, waiting for him to continue. "Lily and I sold the house. We've been going to counseling. It's been hard, but it's the first time I've felt like an adult in years. I wanted to thank you for finally saying no." Tears filled my eyes. David, I don't need thanks. I just need you to live your life fully. He paused. Do you think you can forgive me? I thought about that for a moment. Forgiveness isn't something I give, son. It's something we both earn. You're already on your way. When the call ended, I stood by the window, watching the afternoon light move across the street. I felt no anger, no resentment, only quiet relief. The storm had passed. Later that week, George invited me for dinner at a small restaurant by the lake. We sat outside, watching the water reflect the sunset. You look happier, he said. I am, I told him. For years, I thought my worth came from what I gave. Turns out it comes from who I am. He smiled. That's the hardest lesson to learn. We toasted with simple house wine, the kind Tom and I used to drink, and I realized something profound: peace doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, soft and steady, like the water against the dock. When I returned home that night, I picked up my paintbrush and began a new canvas. A sunset in orange and violet, colors of closure and beginning. As the last light faded through my window, I whispered, they called me selfish for wanting to live, but self-love isn't selfishness, it's survival. And as the paint dried, I finally understood. You cannot pour from an empty cup. After years of giving, I was full again, filled with my own life.
Every single night, at exactly 3:12 in the morning, my husband would rise from our bed and stand beside me in the dark. He did not touch me. He did not speak. He only watched me breathe. I know how that sounds, but it is the truth, and it went on for 7 long months. My name is Loretta June Carver. I am 90 years old. I was born in 1934, and I have lived long enough to know that when your body wakes you before your mind, it is because something is wrong. That night I learned why. We lived in a small wooden house outside Walterboro in the low country of South Carolina. My husband Calvin was a farmer, and I kept the home. Our 3 daughters, Hannah, Daisy, and Nora, slept down the hall. The house was always quiet at night, except for crickets and the slow ticking of the old clock on the wall. That clock was how I knew the time. 3:12, every time. The first time it happened, I told myself it was nothing. A man gets up to use the outhouse. A floorboard creaks. A shadow moves. You make excuses because you do not want to believe your own fear. But after the 3rd night, and then the 10th, and then the 30th, there was no excuse left. He was standing there, always in the same spot, always when the clock struck 3:12. I stopped sleeping. My hands shook when I poured coffee. My clothes started hanging loose on my body. Hannah watched me with eyes too old for her age. Daisy grew quiet. Nora stayed glued to my side like she could feel the danger in the air. I tried prayer. I tried pretending. I tried telling myself it was nerves. But every night the same ritual returned. I would lie still and feel his presence beside me like a weight on my chest. Some nights I could smell tobacco on his breath. Some nights I could hear his breathing turn uneven, like he was fighting something inside himself. On the night I stopped pretending, I decided I would stay awake and listen. I slowed my breath. I let my hands go limp. I made myself into the best picture of sleep I could manage. I did not know what I would hear, but I knew it would change everything. When he knelt beside the bed and whispered my daughter's name, the truth finally came into the light. Before those nights began, my life was not a happy one, but it was steady. In the 1960s, a woman like me did not expect romance. We expected work and duty, and if we were lucky, a little peace. Calvin and I had been married for 13 years. He rose before sunrise and went to the fields. I cooked, cleaned, mended, and raised our girls. We did not fight. We did not laugh much either. We simply moved through the days, side by side, like 2 people rowing the same boat without ever looking at each other. Hannah was our oldest. She was serious and careful, the kind of child who reminded her sisters to wash their hands and finish their chores. Daisy was the heart of the house. She sang while helping me in the kitchen and talked to the chickens like they were her friends. Nora was small and shy, always hiding behind my skirt, but always watching everything. When I looked at them, I felt rich, even when our cupboards were thin. Our house was simple but clean. A small kitchen, a narrow hall, and 2 bedrooms. At night, the girls whispered to each other and giggled until I told them to sleep. Calvin would smoke his pipe and stare at the wall. That was our life. Not warm, but not cruel. I thought that was just how marriages were. Back then, women were taught to endure. If your husband did not hit you or leave you, that was considered good enough. Nobody asked if you felt safe. Nobody asked if you felt loved. You were expected to be grateful and quiet. I was both. I did not see myself as brave. I did not see myself as trapped. I saw myself as a mother, doing what she had to do. Looking back, I know how small my world had become. The fields, the stove, the schoolhouse and church. That was all I knew. But inside that small world, my girls were everything. That is why what happened later felt like an earthquake. It did not just shake my marriage, it cracked the ground under my children. When fear finally came, it did not knock. It walked straight into my bedroom at 3:12 in the morning and stood beside my bed. The first night it happened, I did not scream. I did not even sit up. I simply opened my eyes and saw a shape standing beside the bed. For one terrible second, I thought someone had broken into the house. My heart jumped so hard it hurt. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw it was Calvin. He was standing on my side of the bed, close enough that I could feel his breath. He did not speak. He did not move. He only looked down at me like I was something he was trying to understand. I wanted to ask what he was doing, but fear froze my voice in my throat. After a few long moments, he turned and went back to his side of the bed, as if nothing had happened. In the morning, I told myself it had been a dream. People wake up at night. People stand for a moment when they are half asleep. I needed it to be normal, so I made it normal in my mind. I poured the coffee. I packed the girls' lunches. Calvin ate in silence and went out to the fields. Everything looked the same. But the next night it happened again. And the next. And the next. Always when the clock on the wall said 3:12. Always in the same place by my side of the bed. I began to watch the clock at night with a tight chest and shaking hands, waiting for the minute to arrive. That is when I knew it was not a dream. Something had changed inside my house. Something had crossed a line that could not be crossed back. After the first week, my nerves were already worn thin. After the first month, I could no longer pretend I was fine. Sleep became something I feared instead of needed. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting the minutes until 3:12 arrived. When it did, my whole body would tighten like I was bracing for a blow. During the day, I tried to keep up with my work, but my hands shook. I spilled flour on the floor. I forgot simple things like where I left the scissors or whether I had fed the chickens. I started losing weight without trying. My dresses hung loose on my shoulders, and my face looked sharp and tired when I caught it in the mirror. The girls noticed. Hannah began watching me the way children watch adults when they know something is wrong but do not know how to name it. Daisy stopped singing in the kitchen. Nora followed me from room to room as if she was afraid I might disappear if she looked away. In a small town, people talk. I did not dare tell anyone what was happening. A woman saying her husband stood over her bed at night would not be believed. They would say I was nervous or imagining things. So I kept quiet and carried the fear alone. Every night the ritual repeated. The creak of the bed. The soft steps on the floor, the heavy silence when he stood beside me. Some nights I felt his eyes on my face so strongly it was like a touch. I would hold my breath and pray he would go back to bed quickly. 7 months is a long time to live in fear. It changes how you think. It changes how you see the people you love. I started to wonder if I was safe in my own home. I started to wonder what he was waiting for. And worst of all, I started to wonder what he was hiding from me. When fear lasts long enough, your mind starts building stories to survive it. I told myself Calvin might be sick. Maybe his sleep was broken and he did not know what he was doing. Maybe he was half dreaming. I had heard of men who walked at night and remembered nothing in the morning. I prayed more than I ever had. I kept a Bible beside the bed. I whispered verses into the dark when I felt him near. Sometimes that helped me breathe. Sometimes it made the silence feel even heavier. I thought about telling someone, but shame kept me quiet. In those days, a wife was expected to handle her troubles alone. If you complained, people said you were ungrateful. If you spoke too much, they said you were stirring trouble. So I kept my mouth shut and carried the fear inside my chest. But no prayer and no excuse could explain why he came at the same minute every night. 3:12 never changed. That was when I stopped believing I was imagining it and started believing something was very wrong. While I was busy being afraid of my husband, I was missing what was happening to my child. Daisy was the first one to change. She grew quiet at the table. She pushed food around on her plate without eating it. The girl who used to sing while shelling peas now sat in silence with her eyes fixed on nothing. One afternoon, she came home from school and went straight to the bedroom. She said her stomach hurt. When I touched her forehead, it was cool. When I asked what was wrong, she said nothing and turned her face to the wall. Later, I saw that her eyes were red, like she had been crying. Children do not cry for no reason. Fear always finds a way out. I sat beside her on the bed and brushed her hair. She did not pull away, but she did not speak either. Her body was stiff, like she was holding something inside that was too heavy for her to carry alone. In that moment, I felt a cold understanding settle in my bones. Something was wrong that had nothing to do with sickness. Nora stayed glued to my side. Hannah watched both of us with a look that said she knew more than she was saying. My house was full of quiet children and a silent man, and I finally understood that whatever was haunting my nights was also touching my daughters. That was when my fear changed. It was no longer just about me. It was about protecting my girls. Once I realized my children were being touched by the same fear, I could not keep waiting. I needed answers. I needed to hear what Calvin was doing when he stood over me in the dark. I decided I would stop guessing and start listening. That night I went to bed early. I lay on my side the way I always did and practiced slowing my breath. I let my hands rest loose on the sheets. I softened my face and jaw like someone deep in sleep. I told myself that if I could fool him into thinking I was truly asleep, he might reveal what he was hiding. The minutes passed slowly. My heart beat hard in my chest. I kept my eyes closed and my breathing steady, even though every part of me wanted to look. When the clock reached 3:12, I felt the bed shift as Calvin moved. I stayed still. I felt his steps on the floor. I felt the air change when he stopped beside me. I was close enough to hear his breath. All I had to do was wait. Whatever he was about to say would tell me the truth. He stood there longer than he ever had before. I could feel him watching me, even with my eyes closed. His breathing was rough and uneven, like someone holding back tears. Then I felt him lower himself beside the bed. The floor creaked softly as he knelt. "Loretta," he whispered. My name came out like a prayer. "Please forgive me." My whole body wanted to jump, but I forced myself to stay still. I kept breathing slow and deep the way a sleeping woman would. He leaned closer, and I felt the warmth of his breath on my face. "I was scared," he whispered. I was desperate. I did not know what else to do. His voice shook and then broke. He started crying, the kind of quiet crying that comes from shame. I heard him say the words that made my blood turn cold. "I promised our girl." He said, "Daisy." I felt something inside me crack, but I did not move. "I owed too much," he whispered. $4,200. I lost it all playing cards. The money we saved, everything. Wallace Granger said he would kill me if I did not pay. He said I would disappear. Then he said he would erase the debt if I promised Daisy when she turned 16. I said yes. I said yes to save my life. His words fell like stones into my chest. My child, my baby, sold to a man old enough to be her grandfather. I lay there in the dark, listening to my husband confess to something I could never forgive. Every night he said, "I come here because this is the minute I signed her away. I come to beg you to forgive me because I am too weak to tell you the truth when you are awake." He sobbed quietly beside the bed. I heard him say he hated himself. I heard him say he wished he was dead, but none of that changed what he had done. After a while, he stood up and went back to bed. His breathing slowly evened out. He fell asleep. I stayed awake, staring into the dark, knowing my life and my daughter's lives had just been torn open and nothing would ever be the same again. When the morning came, the house felt different. The same walls, the same table, but the truth was sitting between us like a shadow. I moved through my routine on habit alone. I poured coffee, I buttered biscuits. My hands felt numb. Daisy came into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. When she looked at me, our eyes met, and something passed between us that did not need words. She knew, or at least she knew that I now knew something. I reached out and touched her shoulder. She did not pull away. Calvin came in last. He sat at the table and would not look at me. The man who had stood over me for 7 months could not meet my eyes in the daylight. That told me everything. No one spoke. Even the children were quiet. It was like the whole house was holding its breath. I realized then that fear had been replaced by something stronger. It was clarity. I knew exactly what I had to do. I was not going to let my daughter be traded for a man's mistake. I did not know how yet. I did not know what it would cost. But I knew I would not be silent anymore. After the girls left for school, I sat across from Calvin at the kitchen table. The quiet felt heavier than any shouting ever could. I told him to speak. His hands were shaking so hard the cup rattled in its saucer. He told me about the card game in the back of a roadside bar. He told me how he kept losing and borrowing until the debt grew bigger than our land. $4,200 was more than we could earn in years. He said Wallace Granger was known for taking whatever he wanted when men could not pay. I asked him when it happened. I asked him where he signed. I asked him who had witnessed it. I needed every detail because details are how you fight lies. He admitted he had written Daisy's name on a piece of paper and promised her when she turned 16. He said Wallace kept the paper like a receipt. That was when I understood how power really works. It is not about money alone. It is about who holds the proof. I told Calvin a child is not payment. A daughter is not a solution to a man's mistake. He cried and begged, but I was done listening to excuses. What mattered was stopping what he had started. I made him write a statement saying the promise was made under threat and that it was canceled. I did not know if it would work, but I knew I would not walk into a fight empty-handed. By the time he finished writing, my fear had turned into purpose. And purpose is what moves mountains. I read the paper he wrote with care. His handwriting was shaky, but the words were clear. It said the promise was made under threat. It said Daisy was free to choose her own future. That piece of paper was small, but it was the first thing that gave me back my breath. I folded it and put it inside my pocket. Then I told Calvin he was not to leave the house. I did not want him warning Wallace or trying to change the story. I wanted the truth to walk into that man's world without being softened. Calvin asked where I was going. I told him I was going to face the person who thought he owned my child. My knees were weak, but my voice was not. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and stepped outside. The air felt different once I made the decision. Fear had kept me trapped. Action set me free. Wallace Granger lived in a big white house behind iron gates. Everything about the place was meant to remind people who held the power. I walked up the gravel drive with my heart pounding but my back straight. When he came to the door, he smiled like a man who thought he had already won. He invited me inside, but I stayed on the porch. I told him I was there to cancel a lie. I handed him the paper Calvin had written. He laughed when he read it. He said it meant nothing because he still had the original promise. I told him a promise made under threat is not a promise. It is a crime. That made his smile fade. He tried to scare me. He said my husband would still have to pay. I told him to collect from the man who gambled, not the child who was innocent. When he stepped closer, I did not move. I told him I would take this story to the sheriff, to the church, and to anyone who would listen. I would tell them a grown man was trying to claim a little girl. In a town like ours, reputation was everything. He knew that. I saw it in his eyes when he realized I was not bluffing. I turned and walked away before he could answer. My legs were shaking, but my heart felt stronger than it had in months. For the first time, I was no longer standing still while someone else decided my family's fate. I did not feel brave when I left his house. I felt empty and tired. My legs ached as I walked down the long road back toward home. The sun was hot on my back and sweat ran down my neck, but I kept moving. Halfway there, I sat beneath a tree and cried. I cried for Daisy and the fear she had been living with. I cried for Hannah and Nora, who felt the tension without understanding it. I cried for the woman I had been before all this started. Then I wiped my face and stood up. Somewhere in that walk, I made my choice. I was not going to stay with a man who could trade his child for his own safety. Love does not look like that. Family does not survive on silence. By the time I reached my front door, I was no longer afraid of what would happen next. I was afraid of what would happen if I stayed. When I got back, Calvin was still sitting where I had left him. I did not argue. I went to the bedroom and packed what I could carry. A few dresses, the girls' clothes, the little money I had hidden away. It was not much, but it was enough to start. I told him I was leaving. He begged and cried, but I did not stop. I walked to Mr. Pike Harmon's house and asked for a ride to the bus station. He saw my face and did not ask questions. He just turned the key. By morning, I was in my sister Marlene's kitchen, with my daughters wrapped around me. For the first time in months, the air felt safe. We were not rich. We were not settled. But we were together, and that was enough. We did not rebuild our lives in a single day. It took years of work and quiet courage. I cleaned houses. I sewed for neighbors. My sister helped when she could. The girls grew up in a place where fear did not wake them in the night. That mattered more than anything else. Daisy learned how to laugh again. Hannah learned she could trust her own instincts. Nora learned that home is not a building, but the people who protect you. I never went back to Calvin. I never heard from Wallace Granger again. Sometimes the greatest victory is not watching someone fall. It is walking away so they cannot reach you anymore. If there is one thing I want you to take from my story, it is this. Silence is not safety. Love does not ask you to sacrifice your children. And when your body tells you something is wrong, you should listen. If this story touched you, leave a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. And if you have ever trusted your instinct, even when it was hard, I would love to know your story too.